Welcome. My name is Tammy Wincup, and I'm the president of Protocol. Thank you for joining us for today's conversation on the state of the cloud. As many of you have heard me say before, our mission at Protocol is to cover the people, power, and politics of technology. At a time when digital transformation is now the norm across all industries, Protocol is seeking to help translate that tech evolution for you as decision makers. The cloud is a perfect example of a fundamentally new way of building technology infrastructure. But how that plays out can look different across different industries. Protocol's senior reporter, Tom Krazit, focuses every day on these issues, including in his weekly Protocol Cloud newsletter, which, if you don't already receive it in your inbox, please subscribe. Today, Tom is moderating a great panel to discuss both the current and future state of the cloud. We are so pleased to be partnering with Pure Storage to make this event possible. And it's great to have Sean Rosemarin with us. Sean is currently Worldwide Vice President of Systems Engineering for Pure Storage. And as a part of the global leadership team, Sean holds direct accountability for strategy and operations across more than 500 technical pre-sales professionals. Sean has talked to me about his passion for working closely with customers to help them digitally transform. Sean, welcome, and we're so glad to have you here to help set the stage.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you to my fellow panelists, and thank you to all of you for joining. Looks like I thought as part of the opening comments, given the state of the cloud mandate that we're all about to jump into, I might give you some predictions of what lies ahead from the perspective of what we're thinking about over here at Pure Storage. Obviously, it's an incredibly exciting time in the technology space. We've all seen this pandemic as a major accelerant of digitization, of everything we do, the way we live, the way our societies operate. And so let's kind of jump in, and I'll take just a couple minutes to give you a few predictions of what I see that lies ahead, and hopefully use that as a bit of an appetizer to your main course and your panelists later today. So with that, first and foremost, I mean, look, the dynamics have not changed. We're all making decisions on where and how and what we're going to build in order to transform our businesses and unlock new opportunities. And you know what? The vectors of time, cost, and quality remain the same. The old joke was, faster, better, cheaper, pick two. When it comes to the cloud, we have kind of gone full circle from everything moving to the cloud to the cloud being a hype and everything moving back on-prem to kind of finding this normalization now where we do see hybrid cloud as the new norm. And even the concept of multi-cloud never was and will never be designed for lifting and shifting applications just because we can. But the reality is flexibility has not changed, and flexibility will still prevail in most situations, with organizations continuing to look at where is the best place for my application and my service to run in order for it to best satisfy the customers. The exceptions where enterprises may decide to go all in on one particular cloud or one cloud that rules them all is those where time to value is the single most important characteristic, and leveraging proprietary microservices allow a time to market advantage that outclasses anything else in the market. And those organizations will make a conscious risk to potentially look at less options or less flexibility in order to maximize time to market. The second prediction I'll touch on is the whole concept of data and data integration. You know, the reality is we have more data than ever before, but ultimately we are really struggling to connect it. And the speed at which we can connect it today is really way too slow for what we're going to need moving forward. And so the good news is we're seeing more and more technologies associated with data integration, being able to connect the dots. And we see artificial intelligence and machine learning getting more and more sophisticated in terms of being able to pull those data sets together in an organized, repeatable fashion, taking that burden off of very expensive, very valuable data scientists, allowing us all to scale to the same level of data integration, and then taking those humans and being able to focus them on what we're really good at, which is interpretation and the associated business value. The third prediction I'd put in front of you is the whole concept of digital marketplaces. Now, in our consumer world, we see this all every day. We use the App Store, we use Google Play in order to access our applications. But the reality is, digital marketplaces are going to become even more valuable from a corporate setting. When we think about data science and we think about the ability of looking at algorithms and their reuse and being able to take those algorithms and stretch them out beyond the walls of our company, even potentially monetize them, start to look at the sharing of data sets between companies, a little bit of co-opetition, but the reality is if we all leverage different data sets and we have certain data sets that we're willing to sell, of course, respecting the compliance and governance of our customers, these open up brand new opportunities and allow all of us to actually reach that next level of connectivity with our customers, our employees, our partners, and our ecosystems. The fourth prediction I'll put in front of you is the concept of cloud arbitrage. We're only entering this. We're already seeing spot and reserve instances on most of the major cloud players. But the reality is there is still a huge opportunity for some intermediary to play the part of understanding what workloads need to be run and looking for those opportunities to leverage spare cycles, leverage the slack in the cloud per se, and give businesses an opportunity to run really non-critical workloads, but look at the lowest possible spot instance. And assuming you're running cloud independent services or microservices, you'll be able to essentially spin those up into little work packages, get them done on Slack capacity to very low cost, and then bring them back together. A great example of what this could look like is if you look at Folding at Home today and the work that they're doing in genomics research, specifically actually working on the gene mapping for COVID at the moment, they ultimately split it up into little work packages. They use spare capacity on your PC. And then they actually take those work packages back and reconnect them in order to drive the overall data science. And so cloud arbitrage is a huge opportunity, and I think you will see a whole new economic model come to bear there. Number 5, compliance and security will be under even greater scrutiny. Compliance is not going away. GDPR is a reality. California compliance is a reality. We can expect our consumers, our customers to demand more and more of us in terms of protecting their data. And if we let them down, we can expect to be punished. With that being said, the security of the data that we have been given the privilege to use is more important than ever and will come under tremendous scrutiny. So we can expect that to continue to be a focus. The last one I'll leave you with is just the role of IT. I'm sure there's some folks on the call today in an IT career trying to think about what does this all mean to us? Well, my prediction there would be that IT will evolve from today's infrastructure specialization, our storage teams, our compute teams, our network teams, to really edge core cloud architecture. And what I mean by that is it'll be more about our ability to optimize the architecture of the applications that we're bringing to market rather than the fundamental infrastructure or cloud that it sits on. And the analogy I'll give you is essentially our architects become painters, and the palette went from 16 colors to 16 million. And those that know how to paint with 16 million colors will be in a position to really drive dramatic market differentiation on the back of the unique architectures they can build, they can support, and they can continue to extend over time. So cloud architects will be a critical asset in all of this, obviously very closely linked with the lines of business who are driving these new applications into the marketplace. With that, we at Pure would love the opportunity to discuss any of these items further. You can email me directly at srosemarin@purestorage.com. With that, I'd love the opportunity to turn you over to your main attraction for today. And Tom, over to you.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate Sean's comments, and thank you, Pure Storage, for being part of our event today. I'm here to introduce our panel. Joining us today, we have Alvina Antar of Okta, Angela Yoakum of Novant Health, and Jonathan Rendy of PagerDuty. And first of all, thank you all for being here. Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to help our audience understand more about where cloud is today and where it's heading. And I wanted to start out, our first topic for the morning is the one that we've all been talking about this entire year, and that is the way that the pandemic has affected the global outlook for business around the world. Obviously, not just business; it's a serious issue that we continue to try to get a hold of, especially in this country. But there's no doubt that the pandemic has accelerated the process of digital transformation across multiple different industries. I think, it was Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said back in April, when this was all just getting started, that his company had seen 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months. And that is a speed at which, I think is unprecedented in this industry, and also brings in a whole set of new challenges and opportunities for companies that are working across different industries and trying to figure out their own infrastructure strategies amid all this disruption. So I wanted to start there. I wanted to, reach out especially to Alvina and Angela, who have been responsible for setting up infrastructure across different types of companies and different types of industries, to give us some sense of how that's playing out. And then we'll come back to Jonathan at some point to get PagerDuty's customers, how they're managing this as well. So Alvina, since you're in the top left square of my screen, why don't we start with you?
Yes, hi Tom. Thanks for having me. Look, this pandemic has exactly what you described. It has accelerated digital transformation. We've been talking about business and digital transformation for years, but now every company in every industry is a technology company, and they are required to transform, and they're moving to the cloud. They're pivoting. And really needing to prioritize security, and realizing that time is of essence. And so, what we've seen is that if with this pandemic, if phase one of the pandemic was technology adoption overnight, right, with everyone all of our employees having to remote work overnight. And ensure that they are able to be productive and thriving wherever they work, and have access to every tool and application that they need to be able to be successful. Phase two, now that we're all comfortable in this new norm, phase two is really a focus on our customer experience and what is required to really drive the most optimal, most seamless and secure digital experience for our customers.
So Angela, just turning over to you now, obviously, healthcare has been under extreme stress during this year, and what have you been doing internally to adjust to the needs of some of your constituents in terms of how you provide infrastructure, and what trends are you seeing overall throughout the market as we move through the year?
Well, Tom, I think probably the first thing that might be helpful to the people who are logged in here to this session is to understand a little bit about what Novant Health is. So just very briefly, I'll tell you that we're an integrated healthcare system. We have several major hospitals. We have 700 plus locations that include clinics and physician centers and outpatient centers and all that sort of thing. So about 30,000 team members over about 5 states. So that's the sort of organization we're talking about here. We were very fortunate in that my CEO, who's our digital CEO, I always say, and of course our board, who are some very serious board members, anticipated, and they're, by the way, from a variety of industries, and they anticipated and knew that digital investment was going to be critical to allow healthcare to transform the way it was before the COVID crisis hit. So before the pandemic, we had already invested in highly flexible infrastructures. We already had the capabilities to allow our team members to work remotely, at least those that aren't, at the bedside, obviously have to be in a place to do their jobs. So we, overnight turned about 10,000 team members remote without issue. I think we had to I think call an identity and access management vendor to have them dial up a couple of licenses for us, and I think we had to buy a couple dozen webcams for people who for whatever reason didn't have a webcam. So but otherwise it was a pretty straightforward exercise for us. So we were very fortunate in that sense. And then similarly, when we think about providing care to our millions and millions of patients that we see every year, we were able to use the already existing virtual capability, digital health capability that we had built over the last year or over the last several years, but really enhanced and made sophisticated over the last year with a variety of new device types. And we were seeing 10 to 15,000 patients a day, every day. So that was pretty great. And now we're seeing about 2,000 patients a day, even after we've opened up our 700 clinics and we're back to full capacity and that sort of thing. So, I think it's been interesting inside of Novant Health for the broader community to see the value of those investments that we made early that may not be as obvious to others who are not in our field, right? If you're not in the technology field and you're not used to putting down foundations that will be used to allow you to react to many possible futures, not just one, then it might not be obvious why we make some of the decisions and investments we make, and now it is obvious. And as far as what's happening across the the industries, my counterparts across a variety of industries, healthcare and beyond, for those who had a difficult time maybe making the case in the past, I think it's so much easier to now show that case, right? If you want the flexibility to meet your customers where they are, wherever that may be, if you want the ability to expand your product and services out to something that perhaps is an adjacency that allows you to operate in unusual circumstance, like a global, a stay-at-home, a nationwide stay-at-home order or the like, then you need to have that foundation in place that allows for flexibility. And I love to see that, as I think that was bullet number 1 of Sean's presentation earlier, optimization for flexibility, that's huge. So, Okta plays a huge role in that. Pure Storage and its counterparts play a huge role in that, and PagerDuty in the way in which they think about it. These are players in the space that allow us to, folks like me, to enable the workforce to do what we have to do. So that was our response to COVID.
So Jonathan, I'm kind of interested in hearing a little bit more about how some of your customers have responded over the past year. I would imagine that the number of incidents that they were tracking across some of your systems went up quite a bit. And, I'd also like to hear a little bit more about how some of those customers have accelerated their own, transformations, not just in terms of existing investments that they might have made, but like how they may have taken this as really an opportunity to modernize some of the parts of their business that needed that.
No, it's a great question. Very nice to be here. Thank you for having me, and great to be here with Alvina, yourself, and Angela. So I think there's 2 parts of the question you asked. One is how our customers, we have about 13,000 customers across a lot of different, all the verticals, how they're responding to this. And we keep track of a lot of that data, and it's very interesting how that's been impacting everyone. And then what's it like as people have made this overnight shift? It's interesting when everything, for those of you who may not know, PagerDuty, we focus in unplanned emergent work, issues, events, major incidents that come up, and help really engage the right folks in your organization when not moments, but seconds and microseconds matter to get the right people versus a kind of a traditional spray and pray approach of getting 1,000 people on a bridge line and and wasting, unfortunately, a lot of people's time when there's a lot of pressure and stress on making sure that systems are available. So anyway, given that, and to your first question, we've seen, looking at our own data, an amazing change, obviously overnight. What we've seen over the past, I would say, 4 months is a rise to the tune of about 38 to 40% in the number of issues, which isn't that surprising overall across all of our customers. When we look at major incidents, even minor issues that pop up, and you would expect that given the increased demand on all of these services that may have been casual, as Angela was saying before, but now overnight have become critical, mission critical in our personal and our professional lives. So we've seen that be a big change, just over a third more issues pop up as demand has increased. What we've also seen across our customer base, which is, I think this is the good news, is it's not just more use driving more issues, but we've actually seen organizations get better at addressing it. So their time that they take to acknowledge, their time that they take to resolve those types of issues has actually decreased as they've dealt with this, which is something you may not think about, but keep in mind, a lot of these folks have been on this journey already to the cloud. They've already been refactoring, or they were born, many of them were native in the cloud in the first place. And this kind of leads to your second question, which is, like, what does that look like? What is that journey? How do they see that? We've learned a lot working with a lot of individuals kind of in two camps, whether they've been born in the cloud or whether they're moving to it. They're refactoring systems. I hate the term lift and shift. It's a different model, and it has a fundamental impact on a central IT team, and it has a fundamental impact on the development team. And so we've seen kind of three characteristics come to the forefront as people make that transition, whether they were born there or whether they're moving there. The first is that it's no longer about just responding to disruptions. It's no longer about being more responsive. That's almost a table stake. You have to be responsive. You have to have the right systems in place. It's more about getting ahead of those issues. It's more about getting preventative. So that's kind of the first one. The second one is, it's very, I think it's human nature, and I think it's organizational nature that teams operate in silos. And when you have this kind of a situation where so many services are now being put in a situation where, interruptions and unplanned work become, kind of a domino effect across your organization, there's no way that you can have siloed behavior. So the level of collaboration and communication and coordination, again, not for a bridge call for 1,000 people, but getting the right teams in place becomes really essential. The use of chat ops, the use of some of these things, the forum we're on right now, like all of this becomes so critical as it's, again, been in both of our personal and our private lives. So that's the second one, the non-operating in silos. And the third one is, and this is the one that I find so fascinating. I'm fortunate to have my parents in their 90s that are still working and or not working, but they're still on their own doing well. But in this world, I've seen even that demographic move 100% to digital services. They're ordering their groceries at home. They're doing these things that they never, like both of them are actually using their smartphones now, not just as a phone, which is incredible to me. And seeing that behavior, demographic changes so quickly, it really shows to me that, operations, if I take that into the world that Alvina and Angela work in daily, operations is 100% digital. And behind all of those apps and those services, there's a ton of complexity and a ton of dependencies. And behind all of that are people. We tend to forget that there's people behind all of that. And, those are the folks that are keeping families in touch. Those are the folks that are, keeping the economy running. They're business essential. And so, that operations being now 100% digital, and whether you're in IT ops, whether you're in development, that collaboration is key. And there's a major shift in the responsibilities that happen when you have what we call a full service ownership kind of model. it's a hard transition. It's not easy. And that's a big part of what all of our customers are undertaking right now.
So I want to, in a second, come back to something you had just talked about in that answer, but I also did want to remind everyone on the call today that we might have time for some limited questions and answers, and you can submit those questions at the bottom of the screen. Can't promise we'll get to all of them, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. And then, so I wanted to reference something that Jonathan just said, which kind of brings us into the next part of our discussion, which is, I think, if you look at the last 10 years of this industry, maybe the first 5 of that decade were really about making the business and technical case for the cloud. You just kind of proving that this idea made sense and would work for your business. I don't think, we've been in that mode for several years now, definitely long before we had ever heard of COVID-19. Now it's much more about executing that shift, and it's about understanding where these new service providers and services make sense for your business. And, that's almost as much a cultural discussion as it is a technical discussion. And so Jonathan mentioned sort of the concept of lift and shift. And I think that has gotten, a lot of people over the past couple of years have been like, oh, we've got a cloud strategy. We just took our apps from our data center and we put them in a cloud. We're done, right? And I think most of us who are on this call know that that's not at all true. And that to really unlock the power of cloud computing, you need to think differently about how you manage your applications, how you build them in the first place, and how you think about delivering services rather than consuming hardware in your own data center. And so I wanted to throw that back out to all of you. How have you worked with this challenge internally at your company at the moment, or at companies in the past, in terms of getting everyone to understand that we can't just do things the same way in the cloud that we did them before? This is, something I hear a lot about from the people I talk to, and I'm very curious to hear all of your thoughts on it. And whoever wants to jump in, go right ahead.
Well, so from my prior, so I just joined Okta less than a month ago, and prior to joining Okta, I was with Zuora, who really drives transformation for companies that are looking to pivot their business models. And so if you look at, even from a business model shift, this transformation is required. And then you look at now, as companies are looking to pivot their business models, they're looking at what solutions are required to then support that business model shift, right, as they go to market, and be able to meet the time to market needs of their customers. And so, this whole lift and shift concept, now we talk about all the legacy enterprise companies who are looking to modernize IT with best in breed solutions, right? With hybrid solutions, possibly, as they look to pivot to the cloud. And they're looking for a provider that can actually manage and support and have neutrality in access to all these offerings, right? So no matter the industry, what we see, and now at Okta, what we see is companies are looking at the clouds of choice, right? So there's the collaboration solution, there's the financial ERP solution, there's the CRM solution, and there's the identity cloud solution, right? That companies are looking to identify, what are the core cloud offerings that will enable their transformation, and really allow them to have interoperability, right? And neutrality in their choice, whether it's an infrastructure choice, as companies pivot to, AWS, for instance. They're not going to want, potentially to have one infrastructure solution. They may end up opting to have a hybrid solution, even in the cloud, right? And so being able to have that interoperability is key as companies look to pivot, and it starts with a business model pivot, not a technology pivot.
I agree in that, the business models continue to evolve, and obviously that's when flexibility, interoperability become much more important as optimization goals. so much of the fallacy of the lift and shift is about it is in that it ignores this notion of architectural consideration. This is an architecture problem. We have of course there are the cloud, and making something cloud enabled is all well and good. If your entire case starts and ends with a cost save, that's fine, but that would be very, very short-sighted. I think the idea that multiple cloud environments are probably going to make their way into your overall estate, what we would now consider to be the estate, which is of course well beyond the walls of your company, and the ways in which we manage the capabilities that we either consume or host in those cloud-based environments is something that must be thought through very carefully. And part of those solution definitions, part of that management solution definition is likely to include many different abstraction layers that are now available to us, both in how we build or co-create solutions and how we ultimately choose to host them and manage them. And again, if you believe, as I do, that flexibility is the number one optimization goal these days, then as technology advance continues and as business models continue to evolve, then you'll be best positioned to move and act in anticipation of that evolution optimally.
And maybe what I could add is, I couldn't agree more with what both of you were just saying, and this kind of a transition, maybe to reiterate some of Sean's points from the state of the market, is this combination of, it starts with kind of a technology issue. It starts with how are we going to move to services and microservices, and that has such a fundamental impact on the people. Excuse me. Sorry. And also the operations of that. And that's, kind of the area where we live, where we work with a lot of our partners and clients. And on that operations side of the house, that's where, organizations, teams that we're working with, they so much want to realize the savings of time and money and the agility of which they're moving to this. And it's really interesting if I look at some of our more progressive organizations that we're working with, some of the folks like the people who have been native in this, that deal with payment and funds, it fundamentally changes the responsibilities of kind of this hybrid world that really is a state that I see everybody going to more, where your development teams are now on the front lines because they're built, they build it, they ship it, and they own it. And they have to do that. And that's a very different model from being upstream or downstream, however you want to view it, from operational issues and really the transformation of what will happen when you move to a cloud infrastructure and organization. And then you have the IT operations teams who have traditionally been on the front lines. And what I've seen with some of those more progressive organizations that have been there, which I think is really interesting, is that they've elevated and become more of a business partner than an infrastructure partner. So it's created an opportunity for those organizations to raise the level and the business impact of what they're doing. They're now measuring the business impact, everything we're talking about here, the savings of time, the agility, the cost, that largely falls on the shoulders of those centralized teams that have to work with those distributed teams. And it's such an invaluable, critical piece of the puzzle versus, some of those developers who are new to kind of being on call and on duty and having to, be available if something unexpected happens in this. So as I mentioned before, this migration to the cloud, this movement, this operations in the cloud is such a dramatic shift. And that road to that is a big part of kind of owning services as a big part. And that's a rough road because those are some pretty fundamental changes in people and the operations and how those teams have to collaborate, as I mentioned before.
So there's a flip side to this whole discussion too, though, which is that even if you have embraced the notion that you need to start doing things differently on the cloud, that vendors want you to buy all of their higher margin, tough to get out of services, right? I mean, like there's a lot of things that you can go, there are a lot of directions you can go on the cloud that, will, really allow you to maximize your investment in the cloud, but then also make it very difficult to change your mind even 5 years down the road. And so obviously this is a balance, right? There are things that you need to think about in terms of these higher level services. There are things you need to think about in terms of keeping your own legacy workloads running the way you want them to. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that balance. How do people make that decision between, look, I know I've got to modernize. I know I can't keep doing things the same way I'm doing, but if I go too far, I might find myself in a place where, I'm either paying way more than I need to for the services that I actually need, or I've just tripled my complexity. And so I'd love to hear how all of you have, dealt with that internally or dealt with that with customers, and what solutions people find for this problem.
So, again, this is, to me, this is a standard architectural trade-off discussion, right? And oftentimes, if you think about an organization that isn't constantly making these sorts of decisions. In other words, these decisions come once or twice or 3 times a year, and day to day might look more like dev teams, product teams, just sort of moving and shaking and doing their normal thing. And then, by the way, a lot of the technology decisions being made by those teams are specific to their product and abstracted from the infrastructure, abstracted from the resources that are being used by that product, right? And that is one of the great things about the advanced technology that's now available to us commercially, right? We don't have to, as a developer, you don't have to worry about managing all those resources explicitly inside of the solutions that you're building. So that's a good thing. But what that means is, if you run a technology organization, you have to keep in mind that your deepest technologists may not have the context that they need to make those calls, those architectural calls that are end-to-end in nature, to make the decision of whether or not it makes sense at this moment in time to buy something that's going to lock you in because it gets you there faster, and with that speed comes some differentiating market opportunity that wouldn't otherwise be available to you. I mean, that's a pretty sophisticated call to make, when you lock yourself in that way, as you said, Tom. So, are we appropriately staffed to make those complex decisions when they arise? If we are not, then we have to have some facility in place for it. That we need to prepare ourselves to call upon expertise through some mechanism when these decisions arise, and make sure that we have the right sorts of brains working on it.
I couldn't agree more, Angela. Look, I feel like, what you just described is why IT is so critical at this day and age, right? Because with the choice comes numerous applications without real knowledge or oversight around what the end-to-end business process architecture should look like and what the end-to-end technical architecture should look like. And that is IT's responsibility and accountability to ensure, as the internal technology arm for the business and the internal glue that spans the horizontal business across every business function, that ensures that we don't have disparate solutions that are meeting the same business capability, that ensures that the solutions that we do purchase are interoperable and are true platform capabilities that are extensible, that integrate. And so that oversight is required by technologists, right? And the same caliber of technologists that develop the R&D product that technology companies deliver to our customers, that is what is required in IT to manage and ensure that we don't, that we find that balance that you just described, Tom, and that we make the right decisions, and that we invest in the right areas, and that in the end, the end-to-end architecture is seamless. And that the choices that are made are thoughtful, and that they're able to position the company to grow and scale.
It's interesting with that type of a shift, with this type of a shift that's happening now daily, and so quickly, that a lot of the focus, I think, by nature falls on what are the services, what are the product, what do we need to deliver through a pure 100% digital means. And this whole notion of the architecture below it seems like an afterthought many times, because the teams are off and running. And it's I've seen this, and we've seen this at PagerDuty with a lot of our clients and customers. That's why we get back to this point of lift and shift doesn't really work, because at the root of it, it's fundamentally different. And while there are some great, technology building blocks out there that have made this a lot easier, like containerization and those types of things, every shift in technology that comes along brings downstream impacts to it that teams may or may not be ready for. And so, I go back to kind of where we live all the time, which is the operations of that. It's one thing to increase your agility and your innovation and be able to deliver some fantastic, amazing services. But then the expectation on those typically is very different now than it was even 6 months ago. And because of that, there's an impact downstream on, well, how are you going to manage the people operation below that once you get the right technical architecture in place? And that all has to be thought about upfront. It all has to be prepared and planned for. And it is a people, a process, technology shift together. And it's really hard if you sequence those versus having to think about them all together up front.
And it seems like, I think in an ideal world, you would do exactly that, right? You would plan from the get-go, but none of us live in that world. So I think what we are finding is that more and more people are falling into is maybe not the best way to put it, but settling on a hybrid approach, or where you're looking at the workloads that you have that have been core to your business, that if you screw these workloads up, like, your business is toast. People are being more conservative with those and maybe leaving them where they've always been, running in a data center, and then starting newer things on the cloud. And I understand how people can start to make that decision. I understand how that can get complex really, really fast. And so I wanted to hear a little bit more from all of you about the notion of hybrid, the notion of multi-cloud, and what that really means. I think that, when multi-cloud, we've heard talk of multi-cloud as like this, we're just going to move applications all over the place and it's going to be awesome and we'll have pricing leverage over the providers. And that's not happening. I think we all know that. But I do think what we see more and more is, with acquisitions, with larger companies, that you find yourself operating across multiple clouds with different divisions or with different subsidiaries, or just different operating groups that have different missions. And then, you also have, the growth. One of the most notable trends over the last couple of years has been the willingness of the cloud providers to come into your data center and to offer equipment that will work in your data center with their services. I'd like to talk a little bit about this then. What is multi-cloud in your mind? What is hybrid cloud in your mind? And how do people manage these types of scenarios?
Well, so I think I'm going to sound maybe a little bit like I'm beating a dead horse, but there are reasons why you would adopt a set of services from a single cloud provider. So for example, if you've decided to adopt serverless architecture based on Azure cloud, and you're going to load a certain, you're going to host your data lake there, and the sorts of operations that will be applied to it are going to be optimized using Microsoft mechanism, Microsoft tools. You know what I mean? Like there's something to be said for an optimization that chooses a single vendor and full stack, or in many cases, because a lot of the stacks are open. Maybe a cloud vendor with their corresponding supported open stack, of which there are several. So maybe that's an approach for one set of capabilities, and there are all sorts of reasons why that would make sense. Similarly, there are all sorts of reasons why you would choose to have multiple cloud implementation types included in your overall estate. And it's going to be a case-by-case basis. I don't think that there are things that are inherently good or bad about saying, I will adopt a multi-cloud strategy, or I will adopt a hybrid cloud strategy. There's no inherent goodness or badness there. There is only appropriateness. And that appropriateness is on a per estate, per company basis. And as long as we're thoughtful about the decision points that exist as part of the path that we take to get to that ultimate strategy, then I think that we'll be fine. Goodness knows there are no shortage of tool sets, both commercially available and commercially supported, even if they're open in nature. There's no shortage of options for us should we choose any of those approaches.
One comment I would maybe add to that, which I agree that there is no one size fits all, and a part of the decision to go to a complete cloud agnostic strategy or to focus in your practices on a single one, we see over and over again, comes down to partly the expertise you have in your teams. All of the different cloud vendors, if you look at, are all of them exactly the same? It's easy to say that at a business level, but when you take and double click one level down, they're really differentiating on the services that they provide around their cloud infrastructure. And there's a level of investment I think that every organization needs to take on if they want to start to leverage those services that's the unique part of each of those systems, the different services that they provide. And so like our personal journey at PagerDuty as an example, we started with a multi-cloud approach. And because of some demands of okay, we would need to build out some expertise for all the different clouds, we quickly realized that there was a trade-off of hiring expertise in all of those areas, or focusing in one area to get really good for with the trade-off, or with the focus on reliability, and with the focus on leveraging some of the services that one of those cloud providers would deliver on. And so now we're starting to rethink, okay, can we take a step back now that we've solved our reliability and start to explore taking some of the workload in different areas? But I do think going back to Angela's point, it's a decision company by company, because it does have an impact on your organization skill sets because of those different services that are provided.
I can also chime in. Just look, the key is the pace at which a company is able to transform. Right, you're right. I mean, everyone understands the need to transform, but at what pace, and ensuring that you don't create risk at the same time of introducing a level of business transformation. I mean, we call it transformation, which is an evolution, right, of the business's business model, and so everything changes, right? So if it was easy, we wouldn't be in this position where we're now with the pandemic. Companies are feeling like they need to accelerate this transformation initiative. And the key is also security, right? I mean, so with all the interoperability and access to numerous cloud providers, how do you ensure the level of security and ensuring that you maintain the security posture that is required as you access these different cloud providers, right? And ensuring that there's consistency across the access, and that yes, you want that level of flexibility, you want to be able to extend, you want to ensure that you time it time your transformation appropriately. But then you also need to make sure that you don't, the foundation and the fundamentals from a security perspective are of utmost importance.
One thing I wanted to ask everybody in the remaining minutes we have left is, with the caveat that you can't pick a service that your company offers, what do you think is the most promising area of cloud over the next 5 years? What, if we're going to have this panel again in 5 years, what are we going to be talking about that isn't really on our radar today?
Yeah, I think it's the explosion of computing capability that exists, the availability of theoretically unlimited storage that allows us to operate on the unprecedented amount of data that's now available to us, gaining insights well beyond what we could reasonably ever hope to access inside of our own four walls. So I love where that's going, and I'm looking very much forward. I think 5 years from now, we're going to have some very specific case studies in quantum. We're going to have some really interesting things happening. We have to get data that's going to be plowed through that from somewhere. I think that cloud's going to play a huge role in it. I'm on the sidelines waiting to see what happens next. So can't wait.
I'd say around data science. I mean, look, there's a huge need for deep knowledge with the data. We all have a ton of data about our customers, and being able to make intelligent decisions, thoughtful decisions based on data is something that we need to evolve. And I'm banking on an evolution of data science that is readily available, that don't require necessarily data scientists, to really understand and have deep insights and be able to make decisions based on the power of data, right? All the data about our customers and about our employees and the way they use our products, and what their expectations are to be able to deliver the most optimal experiences that should be at your fingertips, that don't require a sense of deep data science expertise to be able to unlock the power of data.
It's interesting. With moving to the cloud, you get more data. With more data, you have to analyze that. And that more data can become incredibly overwhelming if not managed. And data science and machine learning, I think, is that one area. I agree that's the area that can help make sense of that, so that teams are not overwhelmed. And then you say, well, to what end? And to what end is so that now there's a human assist. There's a helping of this, making sense of the decisions I can make. What are good decisions? I hate to use superhero analogies, but like the Iron Man, the assist kind of capability of okay, we're not talking about automating everything and eliminating roles, but the ability to do more and do higher level activities and decision making based on the provision of really real insights that you can take action on. That's the exciting thing. That's where I think everybody's waiting, and where we're trying to push the ball forward daily now.
So if I can be the killjoy, though, it's interesting that you all mentioned data. I think that there's also, at the time that we're having this conversation, never been more appetite for regulation of how all of you are using that customer data, and the resulting compliance regulations that will come into effect as a result of people really starting to understand how much data companies have on all of us. How are you anticipating those requirements and those needs, and how do you think those will play out in terms of the way that you offer your own services, but also the way you think about using cloud services to achieve some of those goals? Come on, someone has to answer the harder questions.
So there are, with cloud services, and as they relate to usage and or storage of data that relates to customers, or in our case, patients, You're right, there are not only an existing plethora of regulations and regulatory considerations, there are emerging regulatory considerations, and we have to be prepared to react to those regulations and the evolution thereof. So if we have, but again, if we have an understanding of, if we have visibility into what's where, the notion of where is one of the more confounding elements of regulatory constraint, by the way. But in any case, if we have an understanding of what's where, and we have an understanding of what we have, what we're doing with it, which as we all should, then pivoting as appropriate, as based on regulatory change, is just another challenge, right? It's very, very possible, particularly if you've optimized for flexibility. So there's so much data of interest outside of consumer data. I mean, consumer data is fascinating, right? Because we have not just the data that consumers tell us about themselves, we have behavioral data, we have commercially available data from a variety of sources because consumers have allowed other entities to take that data. I mean, and then there are all sorts of, there's de-identified data from which we could gain trends. And I mean, this is all stuff happening. It's already in the past, right? This is all stuff that's been happening for a while. I think consumer data is a little less interesting, and behavioral data and things related to privacy are a little, perhaps even less interesting than those data that will inform scientific advance, which I think are is going to ultimately impact the consumers and our businesses and how we engage with them, far beyond anything cute and tricky we could do with our knowledge of an individual consumer. So I'm looking forward to all that when it happens.
I have such empathy for Angela working in the healthcare space with the level of PHI and PII and all of the security. It can be for all the right reasons, but it can be overwhelming as well. Going back to the point, I think there is an impact on innovation, and it's not a bad thing, but it does slow innovation down. You're right, Tom, you were a killjoy. So it does slow things down, but for good reasons. And there's a reason why those requirements are there. And we have to, whether it's location, whether it's residency, whether it's all of these things, it's important. But I think at the end of the day, I would just say, yeah, it does slow down what you can do if you're not set up for that already. And as these regulations continue to evolve and increase in some ways, there's a trade-off to be made in how fast you can run.
Look, I completely agree. The reality is we want access to all this data. We want to understand and develop insights into the data, but we need to ensure that it's secure, that we understand who actually has access to the data, that we're consolidating, and then for what purpose, right? And so that is why compliance and security are things that are integral to everything that we do and are core to any data strategy, right? And so yes, you definitely do need to slow down so that you're thoughtful of what data you ingest, what insights you produce, who has access to that data. But in the end, if we focus on the fundamentals in all that we do, even in the innovative areas that we pursue, the fundamentals are always there, and so that should ensure that we're not risking the business, we're not for the sake of innovation, right? So there's that fine balance, but there's a huge opportunity for us to take advantage of the insights that we have in a secure way, right? And I'm excited about that.
So that is going to be all the time we have today. Thank you very much to our panel, Alvina, Angela, and Jonathan, for joining us this morning and being part of this conversation. There will be more of these conversations, so keep checking back with Protocol. You can sign up for my weekly newsletter where we cover all of these issues and more at protocol.com/cloud. And once again, thanks everybody for being here this morning.
Thank you very much.